After 40 years, some things have changed, some things have not. This is the story about the black students of Hamilton Hall. This story is about us. This story is about you. This is your story. This is today's story. And I, Kamal Suttles, a young new filmmaker, am pleased to present vala4you, because I can.
I think that the media is extremely, regardless of civil rights movements or anything, they're going to take any chance they have to still show white superiority. It really is that, it's that bad. Like, yeah, a lot of people don't see it and they don't think about it, but if you do take a look at a case against a white person, a case versus a black person, the media will always, take the white person's side. I'd say 70–75% of the time.
I'm asked questions, and that's what's happening here. This train is already moving, and we've got to get on board, get away from the caboose, and get into the engineered car. Get the picture? So what we want is, as I said, resources. I know there's a budget, there's been talk on that blog of funding. I don't know how much funding you're talking about.
Knows how much.
Nobody knows.
Because
Fine.
Until there's a program,
Right.
There's nothing for me to take back to leave.
Well, you can take this back. We need a minimum of $100,000.
Not going to happen.
Well, just put it down. We have budgeted for just the Barnard women. We were going to do a film with Linda Yellen. Do you know her?
I do.
She's in our class, famous executive producer. She quoted me $25,000 5 years ago, just for Barnard. And now we've combined it with this Columbia Hamilton Hall.
I want you to know that we have no money in Paulsville. None.
I know, he said he did it on his
Not a
own.
penny.
He said he did it on his own. But you see, he's a famous British filmmaker, and we're not. These are amateur new people. But we are looking at other sources of funding. I'm a grant writer. I have lots of skills. And I can bring monies to the table too. But we need to have that, as you know, you're in the arts world, that Columbia connection would help. It can be a match, it could be a 2-for-1, whatever we work out
It's
with
not
other
going to
people.
happen. It's just not.
You mean Columbia's not going to put any money into?
Not into it. Not into Paulsville.
No, I'm not talking
into this
about
film. You just won't do it.
So here's the thing, right? I'm going to say something to you, that if it weren't for the black students, none of this would have happened. If it weren't for the black students on campus, specifically that one day, none of this would have happened. Do you know, for example, that very early on that week, the administration asked the cops to come in and clear the 4 buildings full of white students and leave Hamilton Hall, which was full of blacks. Hamilton Hall defined and dictated the administration's response to the students' actions.
The general revolution at that time was Students for Democratic Society, led by Mark Rudd, and the United States was in the middle of a war in Vietnam at that time against the independence of the peoples of Vietnam, and the students here, specifically the Students of Democratic Society, were against that and wanted to close down Columbia in opposition to make a statement against the war, which it did. SAS, Student Afro-American Society, we at the same time were in opposition to Columbia's taking over public land in Harlem for private use, for their own use, to make a gym that would no longer be available to the peoples of Harlem to use.
Flora. I just wanted to get your part where you mentioned about that they should do the film about the black students.
Well,
I didn't get that part.
Okay, well, when we were talking about what the film should be about, I felt strongly that if there were limited resources, that black women at Barnard had to be a focus.
I am Sherry Suttles, executive producer of this documentary and a 1969 alumna of Barnard, the Women's College of Columbia University. I was in Hamilton Hall, briefly. This is my way of giving back to my fellow black students who have not been represented fairly since. This is a story about us. This is a story about you. This is your story. This is today's story.
The administration's policy was to not cancel class, but there were kids trying to prevent us from going into class if we wanted to go into class, to make a political protest. I remember that, and that was a huge political thing for me at that time. What do I do? Do I go to class, or do I not go to class? And again, I had never heard anybody go through that before. And I think in some cases I didn't go to class. So that was hard. It was hard to understand how that would sort of make a statement, why that was important at the time to show support, you know. So, but that was new ground.
Because I was living at home and I wasn't on campus when all of that stuff happened, but I was with everybody in spirit, and I knew it was exciting times. You know, since I was living at home, my parents had more control over me, and they were afraid that I'd be hurt, so they didn't want me to go down there. And that day and age, if your parents told you not to do something, you didn't do it. So I stayed home. And then, of course, they closed the school early, and there weren't even final exams. I guess that was the ultimate benefit. There were no final exams in June of 1968.
I could really feel that spring that something was in the air, something was happening. There were race issues, there was the issue of the war. The two incidents that I mentioned combined both of those, and then there was the what was going on with the gymnasium in Morningside Park, which was heating up, and there were protests by community residents, and we were covering this in the Spectator. So all this stuff was brewing, and then it was pretty exciting, and you felt that something was going to blow.
When it exploded, I was one of a number of people who assumed the leadership position.
I realized it was going to be that fast, but on April 23rd, which is about maybe 5 weeks after I became the editor of The Spectator, there was a demonstration on the campus. I began at the Sundial, marched over to the gym site, tore down the fence there. People got arrested, came back to the university, and somebody, I don't know who it was, said, "Let's take over Hamilton Hall." And so everybody was out there, marched into Hamilton Hall.
So we developed a steering committee while the building was still integrated. The first day, I was on that steering committee.
That night, I went back to the Spectator office on the other side of campus to, with my colleagues, put out the next day's issue of Spectator. We normally finished and put the paper to bed around 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a little later than usual that night because we had all been running around campus all day. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, somebody shouted to me, "Something's going on, people are leaving Hamilton Hall." So I stand up on the third floor window from my student activities building, and I see this line of people coming out of Hamilton Hall. So I run across the campus, I say, "What's going on?" And they said, "We're going to take over Low Library." And I realized then that this was just white students.
And they left sometime between, I'd say, 3 or 4, because around 5 or 5:30, they came back saying they were prepared to take Low.
Oh, this is in the afternoon?
No.
Oh, in the morning?
Morning, meaning
okay.
The night, you know, we had gone through the whole evening into the early morning hours.
With the white students there?
Yeah, they were still there. They didn't leave until, you know, the wee hours.
Or were they in a different part of the building, or what?
Well, they were still down there in the lobby.
Oh,
and we had moved into the dean's
classroom.
office. Yeah, we got out of that. We said, we started to get out of the lobby. It was crazy down there.
You know, the black students did not vandalize Hamilton Hall. The black students were not interested in taking anybody hostage. In fact, the fact that when we took over Hamilton Hall and the dean was in his office, we had to think very carefully, because we didn't tell him to stay in that office. We were not holding him hostage. And we had to think of the right words. We could not say we are releasing you because we did not, hold them. And so we said, aren't you all hungry? Don't you want to walk across campus and get something to eat? We had some very long meetings, but we also talked to people individually. And these were very smart people, so they would give us tidbits of things we need to be aware of and to be, careful about. And so that played a role in our success in ending that peacefully. I have to say that we ate better during that strike because of the food that was brought in by the Harlem community than we did eating in the Columbia facilities. They really supported us. They appreciated that we were putting our careers on the line. And that was about the only group at that time, other than our parents, that realized that we were standing up for that community. And so I really still thank the Harlem community for the support that they gave during that time. Percy Sutton and Charlie Rangel they were very responsible because this was happening on their turf. And so we got tremendous support. But the operational help came from Basil Patterson. He knew who to call within the New York City Police Department. And we made them aware that we had lawyers, that we would sue them till the cows come home if any of the students in there were hurt. We also made it clear to them that we would not leave unless arrested, but we would not resist arrest. They did not need to come in there with tear gas or anything else. All they had to do was announce you were under arrest and we would leave. But we would not leave unless arrested. We would not just voluntarily walk away from the protest. And as a result of his intervention, there was actually a black police captain who was in charge of the arrest procedures at Hamilton Hall. And that's one of the reasons that things were kept under control. We came out of there and we were not beaten and we were not hospitalized as a result of the arrest procedure, but it's because we took the steps that we did to deal with the police department prior to the arrest. Unfortunately, once the violence occurred, all of the attention focused on that. That violence was really a commentary on the New York City Police, not on Columbia University. Columbia has never really addressed that. And it is this, they are saying only bad people got beaten. Well, that's not true. Professors got beaten, students who were protesting, the protesters were beaten. And so,
can you state that you all were arrested and later charges were dropped? Or
we were
city
charged with criminal trespass, and part of the negotiations was that the charges would be dropped and no one would be expelled. And so the university agreed to that. And so as far as we were concerned, there was a successful conclusion to the protests. We were able to go on and finish our work here at Columbia. Both the city of New York and the university both decided that building a gym with a back door for the community, for the Harlem community, was a bad idea, and it was stopped. Hopefully, as your effort to do some filming and to get some of the comments from former students, the story will get out. This was a serious effort by folks who took this seriously and were not willing to let this insult go without some sort of a formal protest. Since that time, I think many of us have blocked this out, because every time we see a retrospective on 1968, they focus on, for example, the Tom Broach interviewed Mark Rudd. They didn't interview any of the black students. They should have at least interviewed Bill Sales, and they should have at least interviewed Ray Brown. Ray Brown was a very successful civil rights lawyer. He worked with Tavis Smiley on a major national town hall meeting of the black community. He's very articulate, and those are the people that should have been engaged and approached at that time. But unfortunately, people think still from their own perspective that Columbia was a white event. They did something to the black community, but all the major actors were white. Well, the major actors were not white.
At this student rally that took place last week, which was a peaceful rally. There was no police, no beatings or anything, no police brutality or anything. There was no mass media to take footage of that and say, look at this peaceful gathering that happened. What do you think about the media as far as them in 68, they were portraying the students, the white students getting all beat up, bloody, and then it's like, oh yeah, the black students were in Hamilton Hall.
Right.
So it's like, what do you think about that as far as the media?
I think that the media, extremely, regardless of civil rights movements or anything, they're going to take any chance they have to still show white superiority. It really is that, it's that bad. Like, yeah, a lot of people don't see it and they don't think about it, but if you do like take a look at a case against like a white person, a case versus a black person, the media will always, take the white person's side. Like, I'd say 70–75% of the time.
We've been talking through an intermediary about how we can move forward, and I'm really pleased to say that we've made a lot of headway. We've forced negotiations back open!
Majority of white people. Then again, I'm from a very small country town too, so that could influence it some. But every issue they have is with war or with like small countries in Africa, but they never look at the problems we have here.
You came out here. They have promised us that they will not disrupt the campsite. Back on, but they're not just back on. They have agreed in principle to make a commitment to fund a transition of major cultures into seminar forces.
Additionally, they've committed to raising the funds for the expansion of the OMA. So we are so close to resolving the issues around ethnic studies, core curriculum, and administrative support that we put on the table. But we still have expansion to deal with. Right?
And because of that, the hunger strike goes on.
To show the end of meetings and protests in front of this university administration to deal with the racist and marginalizing practices of this institution that do not and have not provided lasting and substantive change.
And when people think my form of support as a Barnard student is extreme, I want to say, I think your lack of support is extreme. But we need to realize there's been a hunger strike that's been going on for decades when it comes to the Harlem community and when it comes to students not being able to voice their opinions.
It's 4 things that we're out here fighting for. We want support for our ethnic studies program. We want our core curriculum to acknowledge colonialism and racism. We want support for our Office of Multicultural Affairs that is overstretched and underfunded. And last, we want Columbia to pull its rezoning proposal from city planning.
We will not begin eating again until these demands are met, or we are in the hospital.
I think that's really extraordinary for the students at Hamilton Hall because they took it upon themselves to stand up for their cause.
A lot of things have changed, a lot of things have not. Now, to have a forward outlook of hope, because we can.
We can say